GLS Solicitors is led by award-winning solicitor Harjap Singh Bhangal. GLS Solicitors, when the experts need an expert.
In May 2025, the UK government published a white paper titled Restoring Control over the Immigration System. It sets out proposed changes designed to reduce net migration. These are not yet law, but they show the direction the government wants to take. There are 8 main proposals.
Harjap, you've been listening to the overview there. What's your reaction to Sir Keir Starmer's measures?
This whole scheme, as with Brexit, is reliant on the British people wanting to do these jobs. I mean, if we're here a year later and we've stopped people coming in from taking employment in the care industry and yet found that no British people want to do these jobs, we could really be in a crisis in an industry which is already crippled and is already having trouble, has 140,000 vacancies, having trouble filling these vacancies. halle vi 6 lakh ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਔਰ ਡੈਡਲਾਈਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੀ 31 ਮਾਰਚ ਦੀ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਵਧਾਈ ਗਈ ਸੀ, ਪਹਿਲਾ ਡੈਡਲਾਈਨ ਦਸੰਬਰ ਦੀ ਸੀ, ਉਹ ਹੁਣ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫਿਰ ਅਖੀਰਲੀ ਵਾਰ ਵਧਾਈ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ 1 ਜੂਨ ਤੱਕ 2025 ਤੱਕ। ਹਾਂਜੀ, ਬਾਕੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਚੇਤਾ ਰੱਖੋ ਜੀ ਕਿ ਜੂਨ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਦਾ ਡੇਟ ਹੈ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਕਰਾਉਣ ਲਈ। ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਆਪਣਾ ਕਰਾ ਲਓ ਜਾਂ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਨੈਸ਼ਨੈਲਿਟੀ ਲੈ ਸਕਦੇ ਉਹ ਲੈ ਲਓ, ਬਿਕੋਜ਼ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪੇਪਰ ਵੀਜ਼ੇ ਆ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਟੈਂਪਾਂ ਲੱਗੀਆਂ ਉਹ ਇਨਵੈਲਿਡ ਹੋ ਜਾਣੇ ਆ। ਸੋ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਕਰੋ। ਐਕਚੁਅਲੀ ਕਈ ਲੋਕ ਚਲ ਗਏ ਬਿਨਾਂ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ੇ ਕਿਰਾਏ ਤੋਂ ਤਾਂ ਇੰਡੀਆ 'ਚ ਫਸ ਗਏ, ਖਾਸ ਤੌਰ 'ਤੇ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤਸਰ ਏਅਰਪੋਰਟ 'ਤੇ ਜਾਂ ਛੋਟੀਆਂ ਏਅਰਪੋਰਟਾਂ 'ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਟਰੈਵਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨ ਦਿੱਤਾ। ਅਤੇ ਇਹ ਕਾਫੀ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਖਬਰ ਆਈ ਆ। I got a lot of messages from people. Oh, my dad went. We told him not to go, but he went. So ਬਿਨਾਂ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਕਿਰਾਏ ਤੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਜਾਣਾ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਲਈ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਹੈ। ਕਿਤੇ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਨਾ ਫਸ ਜਾਓ ਮੁੜ ਕੇ। ਕਈ ਲੋਕ ਆ 2-3 ਮਹੀਨੇ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਫਸਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੁੜ ਕੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਏ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜੋਬਾਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਅਤੇ ਨਿਆਣੇ। ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸਾਡਾ ਡੈਡੀ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਗਿਆ ਅਤੇ ਉਹ ਵਿਚਾਰੀਆਂ ਔਰਤਾਂ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਪਿੱਟਦੀਆਂ। ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਤਾਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਦਾਦੇ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ ਹੀ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ। ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸੁਪਨੇ ਦਿਖਾ ਕੇ ਚਲੇ ਗਏ। ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਸੀ ਮੈਂ 3 ਹਫ਼ਤਿਆਂ 'ਚ ਆਇਆ, 3 ਮਹੀਨੇ ਹੁਣ ਉੱਥੇ ਪੇ ਬੈਠਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਡਾ ਖਰਚਾ ਪਾਣੀ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਚੱਲੂ, ਦਾਦੇ ਮੰਗਾਉਣਾ। ਹਾਂ, ਸੋ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਕਾਫੀ ਜੋ ਹੈਗਾ ਹੋਈਆਂ। ਪਲੀਜ਼ ਗੈਟ ਯੂਰ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਡਨ। there shouldn't be a reason why you don't know. ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਕੋਈ ਪੱਕੀ ਸਟੈਂਪ ਲੱਗੀ ਪੁਰਾਣੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਪਾਸਪੋਰਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਾਂ ਕਾਰਡ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਐਕਸਪਾਇਰ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਅਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਜੋ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਦਾ ਟ੍ਰਾਂਜੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ, ਸੋ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਆਪਣਾ ਕਰ ਲਓ, ਬਿਕੋਜ਼ ਇਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਜੋ ਹੈਗਾ ਜੂਨ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਤੋਂ ਲਾਗੂ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ। 2 ਐਕਸਟੈਂਸ਼ਨਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਆਲਰੇਡੀ ਇਹ ਦੇ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਆ, ਤੀਜੀ ਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਸੰਭਾਵਨਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਦੇਣ ਦਾ। ਸੋ ਪਲੀਜ਼ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਰ ਲਓ। ਐਕਚੁਅਲੀ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਨੈਸ਼ਨੈਲਿਟੀ ਲੈ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਐਲੀਜੀਬਲ ਆ, ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਨੈਸ਼ਨੈਲਿਟੀ ਲਓ। ਬਥੇਰਾ ਹੁਣ ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਪਾਸਪੋਰਟ ਰੱਖ ਲਿਆ, ਹੁਣ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਧੂਫ ਦੇਣੀ ਆ ਸਾਰੀ ਉਮਰ। ਤਾਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਈਵਨ ਜ਼ਮੀਨ ਤੱਕ ਆਪਣੀ ਨੂੰ ਵੇਚ ਕੇ ਕਿ ਜੀ ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਪਾਸਪੋਰਟ ਨਹੀਂ, ਆਪਾਂ ਲਾਲ ਪਾਸਪੋਰਟ ਲੈਣਾ। ਜਦੋਂ ਟਾਈਮ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਫਿਰ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਨੂੰ ਤੇ ਬੜਾ ਜਾਈ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੇਸ਼ ਪ੍ਰੇਮ ਬੜਾ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਨਾ। ਸੋ ਉਹ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹੁਣ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਲੈ ਹੀ ਲਓ। ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੁਲਕ 'ਚ ਰਹਿਣਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਉਹਦਾ ਪਾਸਪੋਰਟ ਨਾ ਲੈ ਲਈਏ, ਵੈਰੀ ਗੁੱਡ। ਅਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਦੀ ਨਾਲ ਆਪਾਂ OCI ਵਗੈਰਾ ਜੋ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਫੈਸਿਲਿਟੀਜ਼ ਹੈਗੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਮੁਲਕ ਦੀਆਂ ਉਹ ਲੈ ਲਓ, ਬੈਟਰ ਰਹੇਗਾ। So please get this done. Don't let your parents travel without having their e-visa done, because they might not get back in time and there could be all sorts of problems when that happens. So ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਮੈਂ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਿੱਦ ਨਾ ਕਰੋ, ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਮੇਕ ਸ਼ੋਰ ਆਪਣਾ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਾਓ। ਅਤੇ ਬੈਟਰ ਇਹੀ ਹੈ, ਨਹੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਕਿਤੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਹੀ ਨਾ ਰਹਿ ਜਿਓ। ਹਾਂ, ਹੁਣ ਆਪਾਂ ਸੌ ਨਹੀਂ ਖਾਧਿਓ, ਨਿਆਣਿਆਂ ਕੋਲ ਆ ਕੇ ਬੈਠੋ ਅਤੇ ਟੱਬਰਾਂ 'ਚ ਆ ਕੇ ਬੈਠੋ ਤੁਸੀਂ। ਹਾਂ, ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਵਾਲੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਉੱਥੇ ਏਅਰਪੋਰਟ 'ਤੇ ਜੇ ਅੜ ਜਾਣ ਉਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੁਣਦੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਦੀ। ਅਤੇ ਨਾਲੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਮਾਲ ਪੱਤੇ ਦੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਨ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਉਹ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਹੀ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਕਿ ਡਾਲਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਏ, ਪਾਉਂਡ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਏ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬਾਹਰੋਂ। ਕੀ ਦੱਸੀਏ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਛਾਪ ਰਹੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਲਈ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲੀ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹੋ ਨਹੀਂ, ਕੇਅਰ ਸਟਾਰਮਰ ਛਾਪਦਾ ਸੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਲਈ, ਕਿੰਗ ਚਾਰਲਸ ਸਾਡਾ ਛਾਪਦਾ ਸੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਲਈ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਨੋਟ। ਉੱਥੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ, ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਪੌਂਡਾਂ 'ਚ ਹੀ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਆ, ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਕੰਮ ਖਰਾਬ ਹੋਊ। ਸੋ ਫਸੋ ਨਾ ਜੀ, ਆਪਣਾ ਸਹੀ ਚੱਲੋ ਤਾਂ ਬਚੋ। ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਦਾ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੀਏ ਕਿ ਜੀ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਦਾ ਜੋ ਰੌਲਾ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਆ, ਜਾਂ ਰੌਲਾ ਕੀ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਸਾਲ ਤੋਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਕਰਵਾ ਲਓ ਕਿ ਉਹਦਾ ਕੀ ਸਿਚੁਏਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ। ਅੱਜ ਤੱਕ ਜੋ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਦਾ ਸਿਚੁਏਸ਼ਨ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ 4 ਮਿਲੀਅਨ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਬਣਾ ਲਿਆ। ਹੱਲੇ ਵੀ 6 ਲੱਖ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਨਹੀਂ। ਔਰ ਡੈਡਲਾਈਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੀ 31 ਮਾਰਚ ਦੀ, ਜੋ ਕਿ ਵਧਾਈ ਗਈ ਸੀ, ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਡੈਡਲਾਈਨ ਦਸੰਬਰ ਦੀ ਸੀ, ਉਹ ਹੁਣ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫਿਰ ਅਖੀਰਲੀ ਵਾਰ ਵਧਾਈ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ 1 ਜੂਨ ਤੱਕ 2025 ਤੱਕ। ਸੋ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਕੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਜੀ? ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਇੱਕ ਜੋ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਕਾਗਜ਼ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਸੀਗਾ ਜਾਂ ਕਾਰਡ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਸੀਗਾ, BRP ਜੋ ਬਾਇਓਮੈਟ੍ਰਿਕ ਕਾਰਡ ਸੀਗਾ, ਉਹਦੀ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਇੱਕ ਇਲੈਕਟ੍ਰੋਨਿਕ ਇੱਕ ਡਿਜੀਟਲ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ, ਜਿਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਸਟੇਟਸ ਸਾਬਿਤ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ। ਇਹਨੂੰ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ। ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਦੇ ਵੀ ਲੌਗ ਔਨ ਕਰਕੇ ਇੰਟਰਨੈੱਟ 'ਤੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਸਟੇਟਸ ਦੇਖ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ, ਔਰ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਲੋਕ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਲੈਂਡਲੋਰਡ ਆ, ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਐਮਪਲੋਇਰ ਆ, ਹੋਮ ਆਫਿਸ ਵਾਲੇ ਆ, ਉਹ ਵੀ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਇੰਸਟੈਂਟਲੀ ਜੋ ਸਟੇਟਸ ਆ ਚੈੱਕ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ। ਇਹ ਕਦੇ ਗੁਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦਾ, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਕਈਆਂ ਦਾ ਕਾਰਡ ਗੁਆਚ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਜਾਂ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਗੁਆਚਿਆ, ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਦੇ ਗੁਆ ਹੁੰਦਾ। ਇਹਦੇ ਫਾਇਦੇ ਆ ਐਂਡ ਆਲਸੋ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਇਹ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕਿਤੇ ਜੇ ਮਿਸਪਲੇਸ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ, ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਲੱਭਣਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਪੈਂਦਾ, ਆਟੋਮੈਟਿਕਲੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਫੋਨ 'ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਮਰਜ਼ੀ ਚੈੱਕ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ। ਇਹਦੇ ਲਈ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਡਿਜੀਟਲ ਸਮਾਰਟਫੋਨ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਟੈਬਲੇਟ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਦਿਖਾਉਣ ਨੂੰ। ਸੋ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਖਾਸ ਤੌਰ 'ਤੇ ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗ ਆ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ ਲੈਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਆਪਣੇ ਕੋਲੋਂ ਤਾਂ ਜਾਂ ਮੇਰੇ ਹਮ ਉਮਰ ਤੋਂ ਮੇਰੇ ਤੋਂ ਘੱਟ ਉਮਰ ਵਾਲਿਆਂ ਕੋਲ ਤਾਂ ਤਕਰੀਬਨ ਸਮਾਰਟਫੋਨ ਹੈਗਾ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਆਪਣਾ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਕੋਲ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਸਿਰਫ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਦਿਖਾਉਣ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਰੀਆ ਹੈਗਾ। ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਉਹੀ ਰਹੇਗਾ ਜੋ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਲੱਗ ਚੁੱਕਾ ਆ। ਇਹ ਸਿਰਫ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦਿਖਾਉਣ ਦਾ ਮੈਥਡ ਆ ਜੋ ਅਲੱਗ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ। ਇਹ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਇਹ ਕਿਉਂ ਬਣਾ ਰਹੇ ਆ? ਇਹ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਤਾਂ ਬਣਾ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਜੀ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਡਿਜੀਟਲ ਸਟ੍ਰੀਮਲਾਈਨ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ। ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੜਾ ਸੌਖਾ ਹੈ ਜੀ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇੰਸਟੈਂਟਲੀ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਗ੍ਰਾਂਟ ਕਰਨ ਤਾਂ ਵੀਜ਼ੇ ਕੈਂਸਲ ਕਰਨ, ਇਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਵਧੀਆ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਲਈ ਤਰੀਕਾ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਆ। ਐਂਡ ਆਲਸੋ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਖਰਚਾ ਘੱਟ ਹੋਊਗਾ, ਬਿਕੋਜ਼ ਕਾਰਡ ਨਹੀਂ ਪ੍ਰਿੰਟ ਕਰਨੇ ਪਊਗੇ, ਵੀਜ਼ੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਪ੍ਰਿੰਟ ਕਰਨੇ ਪਊਗੇ ਨਾ। ਇਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਫਿਰ ਫਰੋਡ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ, ਫਰੋਡ ਬਹੁਤ ਘੱਟ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਇਹਦੇ 'ਚ। ਮੇਨ ਚੀਜ਼ ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਆ। ਆਲਸੋ ਇਹ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਡੇਟਾ ਇਕੱਠਾ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਐਗਜ਼ੈਕਟਲੀ ਕੀ ਆ। ਹੁਣ ਜਿਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਪੁਰਾਣੀਆਂ ਸਟੈਂਪਾਂ ਲੱਗੀਆਂ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਕਦੇ ਫਿੰਗਰ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਏ, ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਦੇ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤੀ, ਉਹ ਹੁਣ ਸਾਰੇ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਊਗਾ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਐਗਜ਼ੈਕਟਲੀ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗੂਗਾ ਵੀ ਕਿ ਕਿਹੜਾ ਮਾਈਗਰੈਂਟ ਕੀ ਕੁਛ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ, ਕੀ ਕੁਛ ਨਹੀਂ। ਅਤੇ ਇਹ ਕਿਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਆ? ਇਹ ਉਹ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਕੋਲ ਬਾਇਓਮੈਟ੍ਰਿਕ ਕਾਰਡਸ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਜਾਂ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਕੋਲ ਪੁਰਾਣੇ ਸਟੈਂਪਾਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਪਾਸਪੋਰਟ 'ਤੇ ਪੱਕੀਆਂ। ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਸਿਟੀਜ਼ਨ ਆ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੀ, ਨਾ EU ਸਿਟੀਜ਼ਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ। ਇਹ ਸਿਰਫ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਕੋਲ ਇੰਡੈਫੀਨਿਟ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਹੈ ਜਾਂ ਜਿਹਨਾਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਕੋਲ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ, ਵਰਕ ਪਰਮਿਟ ਆ, ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਪੈਣੀ ਆ। ਔਰ ਉਹ ਡੈਡਲਾਈਨ 31 ਮਾਰਚ ਤੱਕ ਸੀ, ਹੁਣ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ 1 ਜੂਨ 2025 ਤੱਕ ਵਧਾ ਦਿੱਤੀ। ਸੋ ਸੀਮਾ ਮਲਹੋਤਰਾ ਨੇ, ਜੋ ਸਾਡੀ MP ਆ, ਸਾਡੀ ਹੰਸਲੋ ਦੀ ਸਾਡੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਹੀ ਰਹਿੰਦੀ ਹੈ। ਐਂਡ ਆਲਸੋ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਵੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਫॉर ਵੀਜ਼as। ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਬਿਆਨ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿ ਦੇਖੋ, ਆਪਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਕਿ ਕੋਈ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਰਹਿ ਜਾਵੇ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਐਂਡ ਆਲਸੋ ਰਾਦਰ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਡੈਡਲਾਈਨ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਸੀ, ਆਪਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਰਿਕਾਰਡਾਂ ਦੇ ਮੁਤਾਬਕ 6 ਲੱਖ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ ਹੱਲੇ ਕੁਛ ਕੀਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ, ਰਜਿਸਟਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ। ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜੋ ਹੋਮ ਆਫਿਸ ਵਾਲਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਸਰਵੇ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਦੀ ਨਾਲ ਕਿ ਜੀ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਵਕੀਲਾਂ ਨੂੰ, ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਪੀਪਲਾਂ ਨੂੰ, ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਲੀਡਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਮੁਤਾਬਕ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਜਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਏ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ, ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਰ ਲਏ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦੇ। ਵਕੀਲਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਕਿ ਹੱਲੇ ਕੋ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਲੋਕ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਕਰਾਉਣ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਕਰ ਲਏ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ। ਅਤੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਰਲ ਕੇ ਸਾਰਾ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਜੀ ਹੱਲੇ ਤਾਂ ਆ ਹੀ ਰਹੇ ਲੋਕ, ਹੱਲੇ ਖ਼ਤਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਏ, ਅਤੇ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੱਲੇ ਸਲੋ ਅਪਟੇਕ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਹੱਲੇ ਪੂਰਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਨਹੀਂ, ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਉਸ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਕਿ ਜੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਜੂਨ ਤੱਕ ਵਧਾ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਔਰ ਇਹ ਹੁਣ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਅਖੀਰਲੀ ਡੈਡਲਾਈਨ ਆ ਕਿ ਜੀ ਜੂਨ ਤੱਕ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ੇ ਜੋ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਵਧਾਉਣੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ। ਸੋ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਮੱਸਿਆ ਕੀ ਆ ਰਹੀ ਆ? ਸਮੱਸਿਆ ਇਹ ਆ ਰਹੀ ਆ ਜੀ ਕਿ ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਹੈ ਨਹੀਂ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਾ ਤਾਂ ਸਕਦੇ ਇੱਥੋਂ, ਪਰ ਕਈ ਮੁਲਕ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਆਉਣ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੰਦੇ। ਹੁਣ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਾਫੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਪਈ ਹੈ, ਖਾਸ ਤੌਰ 'ਤੇ ਛੋਟੇ ਏਅਰਪੋਰਟਾਂ 'ਤੇ, ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤਸਰ ਏਅਰਪੋਰਟ 'ਤੇ, ਚੰਡੀਗੜ੍ਹ ਏਅਰਪੋਰਟ 'ਤੇ, ਈਵਨ ਜੋ ਬਾਕੀ ਸਮੋਲਰ ਏਅਰਪੋਰਟਸ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਅਹਿਮਦਾਬਾਦ 'ਤੇ, ਆਪਾਂ ਦਿੱਲੀ ਮੁੰਬਈ ਨੂੰ ਕੱਟ ਦਈਏ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ, ਅਤੇ ਬਾਕੀ ਏਅਰਪੋਰਟਾਂ 'ਤੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉੱਧਰ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਦੇ ਸਟਾਫ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਫਿਲਟਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਈ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ, ਅਤੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ੇ ਕਨੈਕਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਏ। ਤਾਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕਿ ਜੀ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਦਿਖਾ ਲਓ, ਅਤੇ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜੋ ਤਾਂ ਹੈ ਨਹੀਂ ਆ, ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਕਾਰਡ ਹੈ ਐਕਸਪਾਇਰਡ, ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਅਗਲੇ ਚੜ੍ਹਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਦੇ ਰਹੇ। ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਆ। ਸੋ ਜੇ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਹੋਇਆ, ਫਿਰ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਮਰਜ਼ੀ ਜਾਓ, ਪਰ ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਹਜੇ ਹੋਇਆ ਨਹੀਂ, ਫਿਰ ਜਾਣ ਨੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਨਹੀਂ, ਪਰ ਵਾਪਸ ਆਉਣ ਨੂੰ ਖਤਰਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਕਈ ਲੋਕ ਉੱਥੇ ਫਸ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਆ ਆਪਾਂ ਕੋ ਇੱਕ ਮੁੰਡੇ ਦਾ ਮੇਰਾ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਹਫਤੇ ਫੋਨ ਆਇਆ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਭਾਈ 9 ਹਫ਼ਤੇ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਮੇਰੀ ਵਹੁਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਉੱਥੇ ਫਸੀ ਨਿਆਣੇ ਵੀ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਆ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਚਲੋ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਸੁੱਖ ਨਾਲ ਵਧੀਆ ਗੱਲ ਆ ਜੇ ਤੂੰ 9 ਹਫ਼ਤੇ ਵਹੁਟੀ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਰਹੀ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਭਰਾਵਾ ਮੇਰਾ ਔਖਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਪਿਆ ਇੱਥੇ ਇੱਕ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਰੋਟੀ ਪੱਖੋਂ ਔਖਾ ਆ ਦੂਜੀ ਪੱਖੋਂ ਕਿ ਸਕੂਲ ਵਾਲੇ ਮਗਰ ਪੈ ਗਏ ਕਿ ਜੀ ਬੱਚੇ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਮੇਰੀ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ ਕਰਨ ਲੱਗੇ ਹੁਣ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਦੱਸਦਾ ਉਹ ਮੰਨਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੋ ਜੀ ਦਿਖਾ ਲਿਆ ਉਹ ਨਾਨਕੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਨਿਆਣਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਨਾਨਕੇ ਰਹਿ ਗਏ ਵਿਚਾਰੇ 9 ਹਫ਼ਤੇ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਭਰਾਵਾ ਬੱਚੇ ਲਿਆ ਤੂੰ ਵਹੁਟੀ ਆਪੇ ਹੁਣ ਆ ਜਾਊਗੀ ਟਾਈਮ ਨਾਲ ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਉਹ ਇਕੱਲੇ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਹੋਊਗੇ ਬਿਨਾਂ ਮਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਪਲੇਨ 'ਤੇ ਛੋਟੇ ਆ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਤੇਰੀ ਗੱਲ ਸਹੀ ਆ ਸੋ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਕਈ ਲੋਕ ਫਸੇ ਹੋ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ੇ ਦੀ ਵੇਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾਂ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਇਗਨੋਰ ਹੀ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੋ ਈ-ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਵੈਰੀ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਦੈਟ ਯੂ ਗੈਟ them done by 1st of June ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਤੇ ਕੋਈ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਆ ਜਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਰਾ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਸਾਰਾ ਪਿਛਲੇ 6 ਮਹੀਨੇ ਇਹੀ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਪਾਸਪੋਰਟ ਵੀ ਲਿੰਕ ਹੋਵੇ ਉਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨਾਲ ਸੋ ਇਟਸ ਰੀਅਲੀ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਪਲੀਜ਼ ਜੋ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ get that done eVisas 1 ਜੂਨ ਤੱਕ ਡੈਡਲਾਈਨ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਐਕਸਟੈਂਡ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤੀ
In May 2025, the UK government published a white paper titled Restoring Control Over the Immigration System. It sets out proposed changes designed to reduce net migration. These are not yet law, but they show the direction the government wants to take. There are 8 main proposals. First, the skilled worker route will become more selective. The list of eligible jobs will be shortened, and most medium-skilled roles, such as our QF Level 3 jobs, will no longer qualify. Only roles recommended by the Migration Advisory Committee and where employers prove they've tried to hire locally will be eligible. Second, the special exemption that allows overseas recruitment of social care workers will be removed. Third, the government plans to introduce a levy on income that universities earn from international student fees. Fourth, universities will face stricter visa compliance requirements. If they don't meet new standards, they could lose their sponsor license for student visas. Fifth, the graduate visa, which currently lasts 2 years, will be reduced to 18 months. Sixth, the English language requirement will be raised for most visas. For the first time, partners of visa holders will also need to demonstrate basic English proficiency. Seventh, the qualifying period for indefinite leave to remain, or ILR, will increase from 5 years to 10. However, some people may be able to settle earlier under a new earned settlement scheme based on their economic and social contributions. More details will be released after a public consultation. Eighth, the government will make it easier to enter the UK through high-skilled visa routes such as global talent and high potential. This is the only measure in the white paper designed to increase immigration. The government has not said exactly when these changes will be introduced, only that they will be rolled out during the current parliament, which ends in 2029. Some changes are expected in the coming weeks. One major uncertainty is whether the longer ILR qualifying period will apply to people already living in the UK. The technical annex to the white paper suggests it might. This could impact thousands of people who expected to qualify for settlement under the current 5-year rule. There will be some exemptions. People married to British citizens and victims of domestic abuse will still be eligible for ILR after 5 years. But it's unclear whether other visa categories, such as the Hong Kong BNO route, will be affected. Most of these changes can be made by updating the immigration rules without a vote in Parliament. Only a few elements, like the proposed levy on universities, would need new legislation. In summary, these proposals represent a significant tightening of the UK immigration system, especially for workers, students, and families. As details continue to emerge, they could have a wide-ranging impact on individuals, employers, and institutions across the country.
Joining us to discuss that speech and the expectations around the white paper, Danny Shaw, former advisor to Yvette Cooper and an immigration commentator, and Harjap Singh, Bhangal, an immigration solicitor. A very good morning to you both. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's start with main general takeaways from the speech. Danny, you first.
I think this was the right approach. I think it's the right measures that are being taken. I think it depends, however, the success of it depends on whether there is really going to be investment in skills, training and apprenticeships, and particularly whether there's going to be investment in the care sector to increase pay and improve conditions. Because without that, you're not going to get more domestic workers entering the market, particularly in care and for some of those other jobs.
Your takeaway, Harjap?
I think he's saying the right things. Once again, proof will be in the pudding. This whole scheme, as with Brexit, is reliant on the British people wanting to do these jobs. I mean, if we're here a year later and we've stopped people coming in from taking employment in the care industry and yet found that no British people want to do these jobs, we could really be in a crisis in an industry which is already crippled and is already having trouble, has 140,000 vacancies, having trouble filling these vacancies. So there must be investment, government bailout almost, and there must be an increase in wages, and there must be rhetoric around a care job. It must be seen as a skilled job rather than, you know, a job where it has very little financial reward. It's a very rewarding job, and it is a skilled job, and it has long shifts, and sometimes you're working 7 days a week. It's looking after the elderly, looking after probably the ill, and we really need the rhetoric around it and investment in this, and to tell British people you need to do these jobs if we don't want foreigners to do.
Danny, what about the general big picture point that we heard Yvette Cooper echo yesterday and the Prime Minister reiterate today, that migration, positive net migration, doesn't lead to growth? Is that a huge shift to hear from the Home Secretary, the Prime Minister, in consecutive days?
I think that was quite a significant statement by Sir Keir Starmer today, saying, well, we've had these record levels of immigration and net migration approaching 1 million over recent years, and yet look at the growth. It's been stagnant. So they're trying to say that hasn't worked. Actually, what you need is more controlled levels of migration, focused on those with skills that we really do need, highly skilled people, and encouraging the domestic workers to take up those jobs. So, yeah, I think a significant statement. Whether it'll be picked apart by economists, I don't know. But I think also politically it's trying to get them out of that sort of conundrum, which is they're going for high growth, that's the goal. But you're stemming migration. They're trying to say, actually, the two aren't connected. Just,
Danny, to follow up on that, you advised Yvette Cooper before the election. Do you think that would have been a big cabinet battle between, for example, her and Rachel Reeves to win Keir Starmer over to this point of view?
There are always trade-offs. I mean, the general approach, which is, you know, we need to get migration down and we need, therefore, to encourage people into apprenticeships and training here to get more domestic workers to do those jobs. That course was set in opposition, you know, and it's been set for a couple of years, that approach. But of course there are trade-offs. Of course there are discussions between different departments, particularly the education department, because student numbers plays a big role in immigration. But of course, you know, the university sector is heavily reliant on foreign students. So of course there are discussions between departments about that.
Harjap, one of the other sort of headline-grabbing aspects of the trail is to change the time frame that you can get citizenship after residing in the country, obviously legally on some form of visa, from 5 years to 10 years. What do you make of that?
I'm not sure whether that will have the impact that perhaps it will have when somebody's coming here to work.
I joined Pension Bee back in 2019. My favourite thing about Pension Bee is the fact that I've gone from having
much of a difference to them. However, there are other attractive options, let's say in Canada, where they can offer citizenship in a matter of 5 years. However, if someone's specifically coming to London, and remember, these are highly skilled migrants on good money, on good jobs, in good jobs management positions, they won't be reliant on benefits or any of the benefits that indefinite leave will give them that they don't currently have in their visa. So the 5 year to 10 years will be interesting to see whether people really that puts people off coming here and choosing other countries. I don't think it will in that respect. It will, however, stamp out some abuse of the system, where people have been abusing the system and attempting to game it by getting indefinite in 5 years. They will now have to try and abuse the system for 10 years, and that makes all the difference. And I think there's a lot of abuse-cutting measures in the statement and in the white paper, and that's exactly when Sir Keir Starmer says we're tightening the system. He's right. he's tightening the loopholes and tightening the abuse here to try and get the numbers down.
Also wanted to get your take on, of course, the set of speech was focused on tackling the numbers of legal migration. He was asked a question about at the end, which is more relating to illegal immigration, about whether they should disapply the Human Rights Act for asylum claims. Clearly, he stamped that out. It's something that the Conservatives have been talking about, Reform talking about in their own ways. Do you think that could work, that approach? And I guess it leaves a big gap between Labour and the other parties on that topic of illegal immigration.
Well, despite the Human Rights Act being around for the best part of nearly 20 years, probably even more, in 2009, Labour was sending back 60,000 people a year. Now, 50,000 people crossing on a boat a year does not really matter if you're sending 60,000 people back a year. The problem arises if in the last government you're only sending back 5,000 a year or 6,000 a year. So despite the Human Rights Act, Labour have been in power since July. They've sent back nearly 30,000 people. So if the problem is the Human Rights Act, then how have Labour been managing to send these numbers back? And why didn't the Conservatives send these numbers back? The problem isn't the Human Rights Act. In some cases, it's the application of it and the understanding of it. And this is what the paper actually says, and this is what Sir Keir Starmer has alluded to, that the judges will be given new guidance and will be given retraining in how to apply that act, so we don't get the headline-grabbing cases that we hear about where someone was allowed to remain here because of their relationship with their cat, or someone's allowed to stay here because someone's child was addicted to chicken nuggets. So the retraining of that, I don't think Sir Keir at this stage wants to take on a judiciary head-on in relation to that, or wants to be seen on an international stage to disapplying Article 8 of the Human Rights.
Quick question on this, and then final one to Danny. Why did it used to be 60,000 sent back in 2009 and so much lower today?
Well, it's very simple. The fact was we had a fast-track system. Asylum cases were decided in between 10 to 15 days. They now take a year to be decided. We had systems in Oakington, near Cambridge, a detention centre, where if someone came in on a Saturday, by Friday their case would be decided, done and dusted. And they'd be told, right, you have a right to appeal or you're going to be removed. At Harmondsworth, near Heathrow, we had a fast-track system. I was on the fast-track system, and I know that cases were decided. They even had a court in the detention centre. So if you appealed, your appeal hearing would be 2 days after. Now the average wait for an appeal hearing is 52 weeks. And recently, last week, we saw Labour were bringing in legislation to try and bring that down to 24 weeks. So it's the fact that the lack of removals has really contributed to net migration as well. And people coming in is not a problem if you're sending back the people that shouldn't be here. That is what the previous government failed to do.
Fascinating. It sounds like something we should talk about in more detail another time. Danny, just to round things off for us, he made a promise at the top of this. You know, we will cut migration, but when pushed, he did not either suggest it would be this year and every year, be the end of the Parliament, and he didn't give a specific number on it. Can he win this argument with the public?
I think he can, and I think he knows that the numbers on net migration are going to go down. We're going to see in a week or so, when the figures come out, that they will be down from the previous high, which was 728,000 net. The forecast is that it should come down to around 340,000. So he'll have looked at those forecasts and he'll have taken a view that it is achievable. However, I think the public are going to judge him much more on the small boat crossings, because that's the most visible sign that our borders are broken and the immigration and asylum system isn't working. And that is the one that's really difficult to crack.
And will he or won't he? You think the implication is that he'll struggle to?
I think without a returns agreement with France, I think they're going to struggle to stop those small boat crossings.
Really interesting discussion, Danny and Harjap. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Who is an immigration lawyer. Harjap, you've been listening to the overview there. What's your reaction to Sir Keir Starmer's measures? Are we becoming an island of strangers?
I'm not sure if that's going to go down well. And, you know, migration has been happening to the UK for absolutely ages. And, you know, migrants are valued by the UK. They form a main part of the UK. And they've helped many industries. I think this is exactly what Keir Starmer said in this morning's press conference. It's a tightening of the system. It's a tightening of a broken system, a system which was not fit for purpose. We've been told that for the last 15 odd years by Parliament itself, that the Home Office is not fit for purpose, and that they're beginning now to try and close the loopholes and to really bring the figures down. It is a reaction to the rise of reform in some aspects, because this didn't seem to be an issue, a year ago or 2 years ago. It's definitely a reaction to that. However, it's also a reaction to Labour making three promises, really. And one was to reduce the number of visas being given, which it's doing, and it's managed to do, bring them numbers down. Two is to increase the number of people who shouldn't be here being sent back. That's being done as well. And the third one was to stop the small boats, and we all know how that's going, not very well. So this is part of the first two pledges in relation to trying to control the amount of visas given, and essentially the free-for-all that was under the Conservative government. We had like 900,000, 700,000 people coming a year on visas, and that was just not sustainable. And the government is now trying to cut them figures down. And in fact, some of these policies are rehashed old Labour policies that Labour had during their time.
I'd like to get more of an understanding, because I appreciate only 2 weeks ago we were talking just about the state in which those who currently have student or work visas are living, even here in London and other parts of the country. Some of our listeners, though, will be surprised at the headlines of the key measures announced by Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer earlier. They will have thought, for example, English language requirements will be increased for all work visas. Some would say, why is that not currently the case anyway?
Yeah, so the English language requirements are something called a B1 test on the CEFR. However, that's going to be increased. I don't think that's really going to make that much of a difference, because anyone who's coming in to earn a salary of over 38,700 or on a management position, they will already have a good command of the English language anyway. However, the requirement for their dependents to also have an English requirement, that I think will have a great effect on the number of visas we see being granted, as a lot of dependents don't have that level of language.
Okay.
Regardless, whether they're adults or not, they don't have that sort of command. So in that respect, I think that is a tightening of the rules. The English requirement language has been the English language requirement has always been there since 2012. The other thing, the big one, is from going from 5 years to 10 years to get indefinite leave to remain.
Okay.
That is really might put people off in relation to coming here, and people might start going to Canada instead, where they can get their PR in 4 or 5 years. However, somebody coming here to work, and they know they've got a fixed job for X amount of years, they won't really care whether they're going to get citizenship in 5 years or 10 years, because for them, it'll be the equivalent of, say, when Brits go to Dubai.
Well, you're referring to, let's say, the lower skilled market that is coming here to the UK, because Sir Keir Starmer has outlined, in terms of this indefinite leave, it will be doubled to 10 years, but there will be a faster route for high skilled, high contributing people. What about the dedicated visa for social care providers that want to recruit from abroad? That was obviously introduced after Brexit. That is going to now be abolished. What reactions do you think to that?
Well, we've already had reactions from the care industry. The care industry is currently crippled as it is. There's 140,000 vacancies. Now, after Brexit, we were promised that the British people would take the jobs that the migrants didn't want to do. Here we are, 9 years later, and the migrants are still doing those jobs, and the British people just aren't doing jobs. It doesn't help by calling these jobs low-skilled. It's a high level of skill is required to be a carer. It's long shifts. It's hard work. You need medical knowledge. You need to know how to deal with people, and people with illnesses, or people with, special needs. You have to learn to deal with that. Also, it involves a lot of travelling, sometimes to many various locations and people's houses. So it is a skilled job. However, it's because it's low paid, it's not seen as desirable, and therefore migrants have had to fill it. Now, the government stopping foreign recruitment, and it's saying, well, we're going to expect the care providers to employ British citizens. Well, British citizens are already not taking these jobs. If they did, we wouldn't have had to recruit foreign workers in the first place. The other thing, I think, which is also important, is the government said, well, there's already 10,000 people here who were called over as carers who were promised jobs. And we've had this story before, but their jobs never materialised.
Okay.
Well, that's 10,000 for 140,000 vacancies. The math doesn't work out on that. So a lot of care providers, we expect them to sort of close.
Yeah.
There's been no alternative scenario. The government hasn't said, well, okay, we're going to put X amount of money into this industry and fund X amount of British workers. That is missing from this. So how does, that is a real concern. And that has been voiced today by many care organisations.
The final aspect, of course, the time graduates can remain in the UK after their studies have finished will now be cut from 2 years to 18 months. Is that quite significant then for the education sector?
Yeah, I think so. The universities are a powerful lobby, and they've already seen a decrease in a number of students and their dependents coming over. Their dependents not being allowed to come over has resulted in a drop of student visas being granted. And there is evidence students have been looking to other countries such as Canada, America, Australia, and New Zealand. However, one of the advantages was this post-study work visa, it's called a graduate visa, which allows students who graduate here to work anywhere for 2 years. However, the government's concern is that these students who graduated should be getting graduate level jobs, and they weren't. In fact, a lot of them, it found out that they up to even 2/3 were working in what effectively were labelled low-skilled jobs. And that was not the purpose of this visa, the government's saying. So they're going to shorten that to 18 months, and they'll might put some provisos on it that you can only work in a graduate level job and not take a job which a British person could essentially do. So, whereas someone on a graduate visa might drive an Uber for 2 years, or they might become a security guard, or they might become a cleaner. These are not the jobs that they were expected to do after they graduate. And this is why the government has decided to, in that case, give them a shorter term, and therefore in the hope that people won't stay on. Remember, this is all about net migration.
Yep.
This is all about people becoming citizens and becoming permanent here. This is about those routes. And those routes are initially start as a student and going to work permits. Those are family visas, dependent visas. Those are the routes that the government has been concentrating on in this white paper.
Well, we heard earlier Sarah Owen, Labour MP, who chairs the Women and Equalities Committee, saying chasing the tail of the right could put the UK on a very dark path. Of course, Nigel Farage feels very much that these changes have been announced because Reform UK has cleaned up in elections across England only 10 days ago. What's your thoughts on this, just finally?
Well, Nigel Farage's and Reform stance is one in, one out. And to freeze immigration altogether, that's not going to solve anything. That's going to create more problems across many industries. Hence why that notion does not get a lot of support amongst any of the businesses at all. In relation to what Labour MPs are saying, that, is this an appeasement of the right? And is this a reaction to the local council elections sort of drubbing that Labour and the Conservatives got? Well, it might be. However, whether Labour MPs like it or not, and whether anyone for any field likes it or not, immigration is a concern in this country, not only amongst the British people, but also amongst immigrants. You get a lot of people who were initially Asian immigrants who voted for Brexit, almost 50%, on the basis that there's too much immigration and we need to do something about immigration here. So, there is a concern. It ranks in the top 3 concerns amongst voters, immigration. And the public has to ultimately be heard, and their concerns have to be addressed. Otherwise, you will suffer at the ballot box, and they will vote for somebody who they feel can address those concerns. So Labour do have a task. It did say it was going to control immigration in its manifesto. It needs to stick to that. And by doing this, Sir Keir Starmer is saying, well, I get it, I understand, and we are doing what we said we would, and we're addressing those concerns, hoping to win back those voters who are going to reform.
Harjap Singh Bhangal, immigration lawyer, thank you for joining me here on BBC Radio London.
Yes, Harjap Bhangal is an immigration lawyer. Harjap, welcome back to the Nation's
Oh, good morning.
Good to have you there. And Fraser Nelson, Telegraph columnist. Morning, Fraser.
Times columnist. Good morning.
I don't know how that happened. I'm so sorry.
I moved recently. It's okay.
That's right. And a free transfer, maybe not. So, Fraser, what do you make of this, Fraser? It's quite a narrative from Starmer at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this is the sort of thing he was railing against in opposition, saying it was, bad to deport people to other countries. But this is a consensus which we're now seeing, not just in Britain, but all around Europe, with sort of, Denmark. I mean, Sweden's actually paying people 25 grand to sort of self-deport. Even if you're a Swedish national and you got a passport, you can be given all this money to go back outside of the EU. So it is basically countries around Europe are coming up with new ways of trying to manage all of this, and the left to right axis is kind of disappearing.
That's interesting. What I mean, the left-right axis disappearing. That is absolutely fascinating, isn't it? And do you think this situation is going to get more and more urgent for countries in Europe as the years go on?
Well, yeah, the basic problem is the current framework is the 1951 UN Convention on Human Rights. Now, that 1951 convention was designed to avoid a repeat of what happened pre-Second World War, when Jewish refugees were leaving Germany, America turned them back. But that is almost a century old, and we haven't updated the framework for what's happening now. And that is that those on the move now, there are something like 300 million people. The logistics will overwhelm a country if you use on the basis that those who get to the shore can claim asylum. That has ended up incentivizing a massive human trafficking industry, has ended up sucking lots of people into this new giant evil. And there must be a more moral, more humane way of doing it. So what we can see now is people moving away from the old axis, thinking, okay, if you're against asylum seekers, that means you're right wing and you're evil, towards thinking, okay, our systems are collapsing here, and we're losing public support for immigration. We're losing public support for asylum. When that happens, you end up with a rise of far-right parties, which we can see all over Europe, and a system visibly creaking. So there has to be a new kind of moral consensus to work out how do rich countries best discharge their responsibilities to the poorer world and to the refugees, because letting people come in and offering them places here just isn't something which you can do in a sustainable way. It's causing so many side effects, and the risk is that we will be unleashing some pretty dark forces, and because people are making reasonable objections to it.
Just before we have a Harjap, dark forces, what do you mean?
Well, what I mean is the far right. I mean, look at Germany right now. The violent crime is surging there, and a lot of that violent crime is immigrant-driven. The police in Germany say 40% of suspects now are not German nationals. Now, there, you have actually, a reasonable person there can say, this is crazy, we need to drop this asylum system. But right now, the only party they've got to vote for doing that is AfD. In France, it's Le Pen. So all around Europe right now, reasonable people with reasonable concerns are given no other option but voting for the so-called hard-right populists. Unless centrist parties can recognise this as a centrist cause and start to adopt as Keir Starmer is starting to do, then you will be handing the agenda to people with darker motives who will take European politics in a bleak direction.
Now, not comparing Reform, obviously, to AfD or any of those parties, how much are they coming to Keir Starmer in the middle of the night in his nightmares at the moment?
Well, quite a lot. I mean, right now, there's something like 130 Labour MPs who know that if election was held tomorrow, they would lose their seat to Reform. Now, this is because your standard Labour Party voter is thinking, this is crazy. You know, the number of asylum seekers in hotels. If you go down to Blackpool now, their main hotel on the promenade is now exclusively for asylum seekers. So if Labour cannot do something about this, of course people will turn to Reform. Now, this isn't about far right, of course. This is simply showing that Labour doesn't recognise what is a normal progressive cause, what are the concerns of its traditional voters. And you can see Starmer trying to reorientate, but being haunted by all the words he used to attack Conservatives 2-3 years ago.
I want to ask you about Rwanda in a minute. Harjap Bhangal, how do you react to what Fraser said? It's so interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth there. And I think a lot of it is politics playing out. Now, what it is...
Politics is what people want. Good politics, isn't it?
Europe-wide, does seem to be a growing consensus that immigration has reached high levels. Visually, it's not good, and this is what people, read and see, what media thrust into their eyes, in front of their eyes every day. The asylum hotels are small boats. Now, Labour coming into this election had three sort of promises, really, three on immigration. One, they were going to bring down the number of visas granted out, which they've done, albeit a continuation of some of the Conservatives' policies, but also in the recent white paper announced this week, there's many changes to cut down visa numbers further. Secondly, to send the number of people back, to increase that, which they've done. So they're increasing, sending back return of foreign offenders up 16%. And they're sending much more back than the Conservatives were. And the third is to stop the small boats. Now, that they've been totally ineffective on. And the asylum hotels are still there. The bills are huge. The backlog in asylum cases is there. And therefore, with the recent elections, people have shown their concerns about immigration. And that, people have been showing their concerns about immigration since Brexit.
Are you concerned about immigration?
In the numbers in the fact that we're a small island, and is it sustainable in the numbers that Rishi Sunak with the visas? Definitely there's a problem. And the problem that why were 10,000 visas issued where there were no companies here and no jobs for people to come to recently in the care sector, and that we now have 10,000 people living here who haven't got any jobs. We're literally just duped to come here. Why was this system allowed to be put into place, and why was it allowed to continue? This is similar to what happened in 2010 when we saw fake universities and colleges which were set above sweatshops, literally, in commercial areas. And when the students turned up to study there was no one there. And therefore, they just had no option but to stay on illegally. Now, Labour does have a problem because there's an estimated 1.5 million people living here illegally or without visas or failed asylum seekers. Now, are we saying that with these hubs, they will be able to send 1.5 million people back? I do not think that's possible.
Expensive.
I do not think there's any holding facility to do that. What can happen, though, and I think what is happening, is conversations with the EU and other countries who are in a likewise similar position. Netherlands are doing a deal with Uganda at the moment as for a return hub. And Netherlands are seen as one of the most liberal, free-thinking countries around.
Rwanda.
Uganda.
No, I'm saying to you, Rwanda.
Yeah, right.
What was the problem? That was a clear signal. Do not come here. And you had a problem with it because I remember speaking to you at the time about it.
Yeah, it's not workable, Nikki. It's not workable. It's not. First of all, it's not near us. So you're sending people thousands.
Uganda isn't near the Netherlands.
No, it isn't. You're right. It isn't near the Netherlands. But Netherlands are discussing
as I remember.
And they will have the same problem in relation to that. Now, Italy, what they've done with Albania, is a lot more sensible because that's the nearest country to them. That sounds if it's going to have return hubs.
Well, we're not going to have any luck with France, are we?
Yeah, well, they did offer us to have processing centres, didn't they? And we turned it down. That would definitely bring some numbers down. I'm not saying it's going to stop gangs altogether or make a massive change, but there's no denying that overseas processing centres, if we opened a centre in France, it would take away one of the main selling points of the gangs. Now, the gangs sell a product, Nikki. What they say is to people, do you know what? You can't claim asylum until you set foot into the UK. We're the only people who can get you there. There's no other way to do that. So you've got to use our services. That's the selling point for the gangs. If you say to the people, well, hold on, there is another way. You can just walk down the road and claim asylum for free there. And if accepted, you'll be allowed to come to the UK. You don't have to make this dangerous crossing, especially if you've got kids or a family or there's a group of women travelling, then I'm sure that will have some effect in breaking up the model. Now, people say, well, how many is that going to stop? And they're quite right. We don't know the figures, but surely better than sending someone to Africa or attempting to send someone in a holding facility where you've only got 200-300 spaces anyway in Africa.
Well, I want
to deter. It's not going to deter 30,000 people. This whole holding facility plan is dependent upon us saying to people.
Hang on a wee minute. Let me put this. I want to pick that one up. Call's coming up. 08085 909 693 85058 on the text as well. As you know, get in touch. I'll read those texts. We'll take those calls. We'll hear your voices. It's your views. As I said the other day, and it was such a busy phone, and you're on the front line here. So let us know what you think about this idea. Fraser, has Rwanda been somewhat rehabilitated in some people's minds?
I think the principle of somewhere like Rwanda is being rehabilitated. The problem is, though, that as Rishi Sunak found out, The High Court rejected his Rwanda plan, basically saying they just didn't think it was safe. And that is the problem. I mean, some people might say, look, it's a perfectly fine country, it's the Hong Kong of Africa. Other people might say, no, look at Kagame's regime, people just simply aren't safe there. And that is, for as long as there are significant legal doubts about the safety.
North Macedonia is not perfect, you know?
Oh, well, I know that, look, I'm not making any judgment about whether Rwanda is safe or not. You know, if friends of mine have gone there on holiday, says it's awesome. But, you know, the point is whether it passes legal muster or not. And that is the big problem in the UK, that a judge would have to say, yes, we think the asylum seekers are going to be perfectly safe in, you know, now it may well be that North Macedonia, while not perfect, can't really be seen to be as dangerous a place as Rwanda could possibly be. But of course, I mean, the word Rwanda, if you don't know recent history, is synonymous with civil war and danger. And that's the whole idea of this is a deterrent to say, because right now,
unlike the former Yugoslavia, but okay.
Well, you know, but in North Macedonia, the point is, you need to be able to, the government needs to be able to say, if you come to the UK legally via a small boat, even if your appeal is granted, you risk deportation to Rwanda. Now, for as long as that's a significant risk, that means people are not going to pay $5,000, $10,000 to the people smugglers to make the journey. So that the whole point of this is to have somewhere which sounds unattractive and which would make the money paid to the people smugglers a bad investment. Right now, it's a good investment because if you can get to the UK, there is no realistic expectation you'll ever be deported. You can play the system for as long as you want. The moment that changes, as we saw with the Albania deal, when Sunak did a deal to return the Albanians, who were at one stage, there were 1 in 4 small boat arrivals were Albanian. When they actually come up with a realistic prospect of being sent back to Albania, that stopped almost immediately. So this isn't really about moving 1.5 people away from Britain to these places. It's about destroying the business offer, which is made by the people smuggling gangs. If you remove their logic, remove their appeal, then the rest follows.
GLS Solicitors is led by award-winning solicitor Harjap Singh Bhangal. GLS Solicitors, when the experts need an expert.